Sometimes a man wanders into a crowd with more dust than dollars and still walks out with the one thing he didn't know he was missing. Bill had Roger, a sharp-eyed German shepherd who'd seen him through lean winters and long miles. But that afternoon at the river crossing auction, the last lot was an old greying hound nobody wanted. The room went quiet in his bones, like a fiddle note only he could hear, and the dog stared at him through milk-glass eyes, a crescent moon pendant glinting at its throat. Bill lifted his hand and spent the last of his money. What he brought home wasn't just a stray. From the moment the gavel fell and the lanterns guttered, the old dog tugged Bill and Roger toward things left buried, a weathered journal, a key that fit more than iron, and a path that led straight into a family's vanished past, and a town that had learned to keep its mouth shut. Was this adoption Bill's miracle, or the curse that would finally collect? Before we ride in, tell me where you're tuning in from. And if this kind of dusty mystery hits you in the gut, make sure you're subscribed. Tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The sun dipped low in the western sky, painting the horizon in hues of burnt orange and dusty rose as Bill rode into the settlement of River Crossing. He was a practical cowboy, lean and sun-kissed, with a brow that furrowed like a plowed field when he spotted trouble. His partner, a German shepherd named Roger, trotted alongside him, ears perked and nose twitching, ever on the lookout for the peculiar scents of the untamed land. The settlement was a hodgepodge of wooden structures, weather-beaten but sturdy enough to withstand the whims of Mother Nature. The saloon stood proud at the center, its swinging doors creaking in the gentle breeze, while the general store offered a haven for weary travelers and cowhands alike. A few horses were tied outside, their tails swatting at the swarms of flies that buzzed lazily in the fading light. Bill felt the familiar tingle of anticipation. Something about this place felt different, almost alive, as if the very ground beneath his boots held secrets waiting to be unearthed. Bill dismounted, his spurs jingling softly as he tied his horse to the hitching post. Roger sniffed around the dirt, his instincts sharp as ever, and Bill chuckled under his breath. "Come on, boy. Don't go getting into trouble before we even set foot in that auction. I reckon we'll find ourselves a fine old dog to bring home." He gave Roger a reassuring pat on the head, the dog's warm gaze reflecting loyalty and intelligence. As they ambled toward the makeshift auction house, a ramshackle structure of logs and tar paper, Bill's mind was already racing with thoughts of the future. A dog would make the perfect companion for long rides on the trail, a buddy to share the fire at night. He'd heard whispers about an old mutt that had seen more years than most, a scruffy beast with a heart as big as the Texas sky, the kind of dog that could tell a tale or two if it were inclined to. Inside, the atmosphere was thick with the scent of dust and sweat, mingling with the faint aroma of leather. The crowd bustled with a variety of characters, farmers, ranchers, and drifters, all hoping to strike a bargain. Bill scanned the room, his sharp gaze missing little. He caught sight of the auctioneer, a wiry man with a handlebar mustache that twitched like a rattlesnake ready to strike. "Next up, we got ourselves a real gem," the auctioneer hollered, his voice echoing against the timber walls. But it wasn't the auctioneer that caught Bill's attention. It was the strange melody that began to weave through the air, soft and lilting, as if someone were playing a tune on an old, forgotten fiddle. It was a sound that seemed to dance just out of reach, as ethereal as a whisper in the wind, and it sent a shiver up Bill's spine. He glanced down at Roger, whose ears were now fully erect, the dog's body tense with alertness. "You hear that, boy?" Bill asked, his voice low, though the din of the crowd made it nearly impossible for anyone else to notice the music. It felt like a ghostly serenade, beckoning him closer, and he couldn't shake the feeling that it was tied to something far beyond the ordinary. The old cowboy had seen his fair share of strange happenings in his days, but this was different. The auctioneer droned on, oblivious to the melody that drifted like smoke in the air. Bill's heart quickened as he spotted a scruffy dog being led up to the front, a wiry creature with graying fur and a wise, knowing gaze, the kind of dog that had lived many lives and witnessed the world with unflinching eyes. "That's the one," he muttered under his breath, feeling a pull he couldn't quite understand. As the bidding commenced, the haunting tune grew louder, threading its way through the chatter and excitement, filling the air with an uneasy energy. Roger, ever attuned to the supernatural whispers of the world, let out a low growl, his eyes scanning the room as if searching for the source of the music. Bill felt the hairs on his arms stand on end, a sensation that warned him this wasn't just about a dog. Something deeper was at play. $20, Bill called out, raising his hand with a determination that belied the strange happenings around him. The auctioneer paused, momentarily distracted by the dog's gaze, locking onto Bill, as if it recognized him from a life-long past. But the music, oh that music, it draped around him like a fog, weaving memories and mysteries into the fabric of the evening. 30, a voice chimed from the back of the room, shattering the moment. Bill turned, his brow knitted in irritation, but the moment was fleeting. The music was fading, slipping back into the shadows, and a chill crept down his spine. He had to secure that dog, whatever it took, for he felt in his bones that this was only the beginning of something extraordinary. The auctioneer's gavel came down hard, but not before Bill caught a glimpse of something shimmering near the old dog's collar, a glint that shimmered like starlight. The air thickened with anticipation, and Bill leaned in closer, ready to stake his claim. Whatever waited beyond the confines of this auction, he could sense it was a thread woven into the very fabric of his fate, and he had no intention of letting it unravel. Bill felt the excitement in the air, electric and charged, as he raised his hand again, his voice ringing out with newfound resolve. $40! The words echoed through the makeshift auction house, cutting through the chatter like a knife. The moment the bid left his lips, the strange melody shifted, as if it too were responding to his determination. The auctioneer, with his bushy mustache twitching, glanced at Bill with newfound interest, his brow furrowed. "We got ourselves a live one, folks. $40 from this fella here." He turned to the crowd, his voice booming. "Anyone want to go higher?" The murmurs of the crowd rose, but Bill could hardly hear them, the music swirling in his ears, mingling with the pounding of his heart. As the bidding war continued, Bill felt the connection to the old dog intensify. It was as if their fates were entwined, each bid echoing through time, drawing him closer to the creature that seemed to belong to a different world. Roger stood by his side, a steadfast sentinel, his gaze darting across the crowd, attuned to the undercurrents of emotions swirling in the air. The dog's deep-set eyes held a wisdom that belied its years. Bill could sense a story waiting to be uncovered, a tale buried beneath layers of dust and time. He leaned closer, catching the faint glimmer around the dog's collar again, a silver pendant shaped like a crescent moon, catching the light just so. The old cowboy's heart raced at the sight. It looked almost like something out of the old legends, a talisman with ties to the unseen. 50! Shouted a voice from the back, a wiry man in a dusty hat who seemed keen on claiming the scruffy mutt for his own. Bill's resolve hardened. 60! The crowd gasped, surprised by the sudden surge of competition. He could feel the spirit of the dog calling to him, urging him on, and he wouldn't back down now. The auctioneer's gavel was poised, hovering like a hawk ready to swoop down on a rabbit. 70! The figure of the dog shimmered in Bill's mind, and the melody grew more urgent, wrapping around him like an embrace. It was an invitation, a promise of secrets waiting to be uncovered. The crowd began to shift, murmurs turning into whispers. Roger, ever perceptive, shifted on his paws and let out a low bark, breaking the tension in the air. "Hold your horses there, Roger," Bill whispered, though he too felt an unsettling shift. It was as if the very walls of the auction house began to close in, the air thick with unsaid words and hushed fears. The auctioneer seemed caught up in the moment, his eyes darting between Bill and the man in the back. "Do I hear 80? He shouted, but the rhythm of the bidding was drowned out by a sudden chill that swept through the room. A wind gusted through the open windows, rattling the loose boards, and Bill felt an otherworldly presence brushing against his skin. Then, just as the tension reached its peak, the music ceased, leaving an eerie silence that enveloped the crowd. The dog looked directly at Bill, and in that moment, he felt a connection deeper than any he had ever known. It was as if the dog's soul reached out, intertwining with his own, showing him glimpses of a life lived in service, love, and sacrifice. 80! Bill shouted again, his voice hoarse yet resolute. The room was still, the auctioneer's gavel held at bay, as eyes turned toward the old dog, and the whispers grew louder, stories of the dog's past circulating like wildfire. They spoke of strange happenings on the nearby trails, tales of lost travelers guided home by a ghostly mutt, and old miners who swore the dog had saved their lives more than once. Bill's mind raced. If this old beast had indeed guided lost souls, what more could it do? He had heard the legends of the lost souls of the Pecos, spirits bound to the land, and how they sometimes took the form of creatures to protect those who were lost or in need. "All right, folks, we're at $80. The auctioneer's voice cut through Bill's thoughts. Going once, going twice. Bill could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him. 90, he called out, his heart pounding as he raised his hand, determination surging through his veins. The auctioneer paused, his eyes narrowing at the man in the back, who glared daggers at Bill. 90 it is. Do I hear 100? But before the man could respond, Roger stood taller, a low growl rumbling from deep within his chest. The air grew thick again, swirling with energy that felt almost palpable. Bill shot a look at Roger, understanding flashing between them. The dog sensed it too, the impending danger lurking just beyond the shadows. "Last call, folks. Who's going to take this fine hound home?" The auctioneer pressed, his voice rising, but all Bill could focus on was the way the old dog looked at him, as if urging him to act. It was then that the music returned, soft but insistent, beckoning him to trust the strange bond they shared. $100! Bill called out, his voice steady and strong, cutting through the gathering storm. The crowd gasped again, but something felt off. The melody intensified, each note filled with urgency, as though it were a warning. The auctioneer brought his gavel down hard, and in that very instant, a gust of wind burst through the auction house, extinguishing the flickering lanterns, plunging the room into darkness. A collective gasp echoed, and as the old dog bolted forward, Bill knew he had to follow. The world around him faded away, swallowed by the shadows, but the melody remained, guiding him through the chaos. "Stay close, Roger," he shouted, instinctively trusting the bond they shared, knowing this was only the beginning of a tale that would stretch beyond time and reality, one that would lead him into the heart of a mystery far deeper than he had ever imagined. The darkness enveloped the auction house like a thick fog, smothering the last flickers of light and leaving Bill disoriented. The music, though faint, still resonated in his mind, a spectral guide amid the chaos. He reached out, feeling for the familiar warmth of Roger's body, and when his fingers brushed against the dog's coarse fur, a surge of reassurance flowed through him. "Let's get out of here, boy," Bill murmured, his voice low, yet steady. The old dog's sharp instincts were now the only compass he could trust. With a tentative step forward, Bill followed the sound of Roger's padded feet, straining to see in the oppressive blackness. The air was thick with a strange energy, an electric charge that prickled at the back of his neck, urging him to move faster. As they neared the entrance, the door swung open with a force that felt supernatural, revealing the moonlit expanse of the frontier outside. Bill blinked against the sudden brightness, instinctively shielding his eyes as he stepped into the cool night air. The auction house stood behind him like a dark giant, its silhouette a stark contrast against the shimmering stars overhead. "Whoa there, Roger," he whispered, squinting to see the night around them. The moon hung high, casting silver beams across the dusty street. He could hear the faint rustle of leaves, and the night seemed alive with whispers. What in tarnation just happened back there? Roger sniffed the ground, ears perked, and Bill watched as the dog's nose twitched with purpose. It was as if Roger was deciphering an invisible map, tracing scents that danced in the night air. With a few quick steps, Roger darted toward the alley beside the auction house, his tail held high, a signal of confidence and resolve. "Easy now. Don't go rushing into trouble," Bill called after him, but he couldn't help the way his heart raced. He followed, his boots crunching against the gravel, the coolness of the earth grounding him. The alley was shadowy and narrow, the walls looming like ancient sentinels, but Roger moved with assurance, weaving through the shadows. The dog paused suddenly, his body rigid, and Bill felt a chill creep down his spine. "What is it, boy?" he whispered, glancing around for any sign of danger. That's when he noticed it, a flicker of light at the far end of the alley, a soft glow that pulsed like a heartbeat. "Let's take a gander," Bill suggested, his curiosity piqued despite the knot of unease in his stomach. He approached cautiously, each step measured, as the light grew brighter, revealing a peculiar sight. It was a small, old lantern, its glass cracked but still flickering with a warm, inviting glow. "What in the world?" Bill murmured, kneeling to inspect it. The lantern was fashioned from iron, its intricate designs telling stories of a time long past. He brushed away dust and cobwebs, revealing a faint inscription on the side, words etched deep into the metal. "To guide the lost, seek the path of the moon." Bill read aloud, his brow furrowing. He glanced at Roger, who was now sitting beside him, watching intently. Seems like we've stumbled upon something a mite peculiar, wouldn't you say? Before he could ponder further, the ground beneath them rumbled slightly, a low, throaty growl that vibrated through the earth. Bill quickly stood, the lantern still clutched in his hand. "That's not a good sign," he muttered, looking to the shadows as they seemed to shift, almost breathing with anticipation. Roger's ears perked up again, and he barked, a deep, warning growl that echoed off the brick walls. The hairs on Bill's neck stood on end. "All right, let's skedaddle before whatever's lurking decides to pay us a visit." As they turned to leave, Bill caught a glimpse of something in the corner of his eye. A figure, pale and shimmering, stood at the mouth of the alley, cloaked in mist. It was a woman, her features indistinct, yet her eyes shone with a luminescent glow that pierced through the gloom. Bill's heart raced, but he felt an inexplicable pull, as if she were tethered to the very fabric of his being. Who are you?" he managed to ask, his voice catching in his throat. The woman's lips moved, but no sound emerged. Only the music from the auction house began to swell again, intertwining with the soft rustle of the wind. It was the same melody that had called to him earlier, a haunting lull that wrapped around him like a tender embrace. "Roger, stay close," Bill instructed, stepping back instinctively. The dog remained steadfast at his side, growling softly, ready to protect. The apparition raised a hand, gesturing toward the lantern. Bill felt its warmth pulse against his skin, and the moment he looked back at the glowing object, it flickered with urgency, illuminating a path through the darkness. "Find the lost," she mouthed silently, the words resonating in his heart rather than his ears. A flash of understanding sparked within Bill. The dog, the lantern, this mysterious figure, each was a piece of a puzzle that beckoned him to uncover the truth hidden beneath layers of time. "I reckon we're meant to help," he said softly to Roger, who turned to look up at him, eyes brimming with understanding. With the lantern held high, casting its glow into the shadows, Bill felt a surge of determination. He was not just a cowboy in search of companionship. He was now a seeker of lost souls, bound to a path that twisted through the unknown. Together, he and Roger would unravel the mystery that had been waiting, hidden in the echoes of the past. "Let's find out what secrets this land holds," he declared, stepping forward into the night. The dog padded beside him, both ready to face whatever lay ahead, a duo forged in fate, embarking on a journey far beyond their wildest dreams. The night air hung thick with anticipation, and the lantern's light flickered like the heartbeat of the land itself, guiding Bill and Roger deeper into the shadows of the alley. The faint strains of the auction music faded behind them, swallowed by the night as they ventured forth, driven by an instinct that felt older than the stars themselves. "Steady on, Roger," Bill murmured, aware of the dog's tense posture beside him. The old hound sniffed the ground, his nose twitching, attuned to scents that escaped Bill's human senses. It was as if Roger had a sixth sense, a gift that told him when trouble was afoot, or when spirits lingered just beyond the veil of the living. As they pressed on, the alley opened up into a wider path, cobblestones slick with moisture from an earlier rain that glistened under the lantern's glow. Bill paused to take in his surroundings, his heart still racing from the spectral encounter. "Well, I'll be," he muttered, spotting an old wooden sign that creaked in the gentle breeze. The letters were faded, but with a little squinting, he could make out the words, "Mason's Hollow." Seems like we've wandered into a ghost town," he said, feeling a shiver dance down his spine. The stories of Mason's Hollow were familiar to him, tales of a once thriving settlement that had succumbed to misfortune, whispered over campfires by old-timers who spoke of spirits that still roamed the deserted streets. Roger's ears perked up, and he stood stock still, a low growl rumbling from his throat. Bill followed the dog's gaze and noticed a figure flitting between the trees that lined the hollow. It was there and then gone, like a wisp of smoke in the wind. "Did you see that, boy?" he asked, an uneasy excitement bubbling within him. With the lantern held high, Bill stepped cautiously into the hollow. The wooden buildings loomed like ghostly sentinels, their windows dark and lifeless. "Ain't nobody around but us," he assured Roger, though he couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The lantern's light danced across a dilapidated storefront, its door hanging crookedly on rusted hinges. Bill approached, the floorboards creaking ominously beneath his weight. He pushed the door open with a careful nudge, and it swung wide with a mournful groan. Inside, dust motes floated in the air, illuminated by the warm glow of the lantern. Shelves lined with cracked jars and faded signs hinted at a life once bustling with trade. "Let's see what we can dig up," he said, scanning the room. Roger trotted in behind him, nose to the ground, exploring every nook and cranny. As Bill rummaged through a pile of old newspapers and trinkets, a chill brushed against the back of his neck. He turned to see Roger standing before a half-open trapdoor at the far end of the room, his nose pressed to the wood. The dog's growl deepened, a warning that sent a thrill of dread coursing through Bill. "What do you reckon is down there, Roger?" The dog let out a low bark, as if urging Bill to approach. With the lantern still in hand, Bill knelt beside the trapdoor and pried it open slowly, dust billowing out like ghosts escaping their confines. "Guess we're going down," he said, his voice steady despite the unease clenching his gut. He clambered down the narrow steps, the lantern illuminating the way into a musty cellar that reeked of decay. Old barrels lined the walls, and shadows played tricks on his eyes as he moved deeper into the darkness. Roger followed closely, his instincts sharp, ever alert to the unseen. At the bottom of the stairs, Bill's foot struck something solid. He bent to inspect, revealing an old, tarnished locket, its delicate chain tangled in a web of dust and shadows. "What in tarnation?" he said, lifting it to the light. The locket was engraved with the same intricate designs as the lantern, symbols that whispered of forgotten stories. "Looks like we found ourselves a treasure," Bill mused, turning the locket over in his hands. There was an inscription on the back, faint but legible: "For love lost, the light shall guide." He felt a strange pull towards it, an echo of the woman from the alley lingering in the back of his mind. "Seems like this is part of what we're meant to uncover," he said, glancing at Roger, who seemed to sense the weight of the moment. "You think it belonged to the lady we saw?" Roger wagged his tail, his eyes bright, as if to say, "Let's find out." With newfound resolve, Bill pocketed the locket and rose to his feet. "All right, partner, we've got more digging to do." They retraced their steps up the creaky stairs, the lantern's glow guiding them back into the night. Emerging from the storefront, Bill cast a glance around the hollow. The moon hung high, casting a silver sheen across the abandoned buildings, and the wind whispered secrets through the cracks. "If this is a ghost town, then it's high time we found out what haunts it," he declared, determination lighting a fire in his chest. Roger barked in agreement, and together they set off again, the lantern swinging at Bill's side, its light a beacon in the dark, a promise that they would not turn back until the mystery was unraveled. The night stretched before them, alive with the echoes of the past and the promise of the adventure yet to come. The night air was cool against Bill's skin as he and Roger ventured deeper into the ghost town, their footsteps echoing softly against the cobblestone streets, long since cracked and worn by time. Shadows danced around them, flickering with the swaying lantern's light, and the silence was thick enough to taste. It was a silence that seemed to hold its breath, waiting for something to break it. Roger, with his nose keenly attuned to the sense of the past, suddenly stopped, ears perked and body taut. Bill followed the dog's gaze, squinting into the darkness, but saw nothing save the gnarled branches of an old oak tree that loomed overhead, its skeletal limbs reaching out like the hands of a forgotten spectre. "What is it, boy?" he whispered, concern creeping into his voice. With a low growl, Roger edged forward, nose to the ground, sniffing out some hidden truth. Bill trusted the animal's instincts and felt a shiver of anticipation. This town had secrets to share, and he was hell-bent on uncovering them. "Let's move a little closer," he said, the lantern swinging gently as he followed Roger. They crept toward a small building that had once been a saloon, its doors hanging open like a mouth ready to speak. The sign above, long faded, still bore the name, the Rusty Spur. Bill could almost hear the laughter and the clinking of glasses from years gone by, and a pang of nostalgia tugged at his heart. As they stepped inside, the lantern cast eerie shadows across the bar, where dust motes danced in the air. Bill ran a finger along the countertop, leaving a streak in the grime. "Ain't no one been here in a coon's age," he muttered. His eyes darted around the room, searching for any clue that might shed light on the enigma before him. Roger's growl intensified, leading Bill to a small staircase in the far corner that spiraled down into darkness. "You think there's more to find down there?" he asked, glancing back at the dog. Roger's tail wagged, a mix of excitement and determination, and Bill nodded in agreement. "All right then, let's see what ghosts are lurking." As they descended the creaky stairs, the air grew heavy and damp, the scent of mold mingling with the stale remnants of liquor. At the bottom, the lantern's light revealed a narrow cellar filled with barrels and crates, all stacked haphazardly against the walls. It was a treasure trove of forgotten memories. Must have been a right busy place back in its day, Bill mused, rummaging through an old crate. His fingers brushed against something smooth and cold, a bottle, its glass dull and cracked. Could be worth a pretty penny to the right buyer, but it was the unexpected weight in his pocket, the locket, that tugged at his thoughts, urging him to dig deeper. Roger, meanwhile, had moved to the far wall, sniffing intently. His ears twitched, and he let out a sharp bark, breaking the silence like thunder. "What is it, boy?" Bill called, his heart racing. He hurried over, his lantern illuminating Roger's find, a tattered journal, half buried beneath a pile of dusty rags. With a quick yank, Bill pulled the journal free, its leather cover cracked and worn. "Now, this might be just what we need," he said, his excitement palpable. He knelt on the floor, the lantern's light casting a warm glow on the pages as he opened it carefully, the spine creaking in protest. The handwriting was elegant but shaky, the ink faded in places. The first entry was dated over a century ago. "To my dearest Clara," it began, and Bill felt a strange connection to the words, as if the spirit of the writer lingered in the very air around him. "The shadows grow long, and I fear the darkness is coming for me." A chill ran down Bill's spine as he read on, the words growing darker. Clara's love was described in glowing terms, but there were hints of foreboding. The townsfolk speak of the spirits that haunt this land, of betrayal and loss. Bill's brow furrowed as he turned the pages, skimming through tales of heartache and fear. "I must protect her, for if I do not, I shall lose everything." "Goodness gracious," Bill murmured, glancing at Roger, who was now sitting patiently beside him, head tilted as if understanding the weight of the moment. "Seems like this town's got more ghosts than we bargained for, eh?" He continued to read, the tales weaving a web of intrigue around him. Clara's name appeared repeatedly, her spirit seemingly intertwined with the very fabric of the town. "There's a connection here," he said, closing the journal gently, a newfound urgency filling his veins. "We've got to find out what happened to Clara." Roger let out a soft whine, nudging Bill's hand as if urging him to act. The dog's intelligence and loyalty were a comfort, a reminder that he wasn't alone in this quest. Bill stood, determination set in his jaw. "Let's find Clara's story, partner. If she's still here, we owe it to her to set things right." As they made their way back to the cellar's exit, the lantern flickered, casting long shadows that danced eerily along the walls. The air grew colder, and Bill couldn't shake the feeling that something was shifting around them, as if the very ground beneath their feet held a breathless anticipation. "Just a ghost town, huh?" he whispered, a grin creeping onto his face, though the smile didn't reach his eyes. "I reckon we're in for a wild ride." Roger barked in agreement, and together they stepped into the moonlit night, ready to follow the threads of the past, determined to uncover the truth that lay hidden in the darkness. The wind sighed softly through the trees, carrying with it the whispers of lost souls, urging them onward into the heart of the mystery that awaited. The night air was crisp as Bill stepped back into the moonlight, the cool breeze brushing against his skin like a gentle hand. The stars twinkled overhead, a vast blanket of silver scattered against the deep indigo sky. He took a moment to gather his thoughts, the journal still clutched tightly in his hand, its weight now feeling like a key to unlock the town's secrets. "All right, Roger," he said, glancing down at his loyal companion, whose nose twitched with anticipation. "We've got ourselves a mystery to unravel, and I reckon it's high time we started piecing things together." The dog let out a soft whine, as if he understood the gravity of their task. Bill surveyed the surroundings, the crumbling remains of the old tavern casting long shadows in the moonlight. "First things first," he muttered, "let's get our bearings straight." He set off toward the stables, recalling the names scribbled in the journal. Clara had mentioned a local doctor, one Dr. Hargrove, who attended to the townsfolk, and whose name often appeared alongside that of Clara's. As they approached the stables, the wood creaked underfoot, the smell of hay and leather mixing with the lingering scent of earth and night. Bill reached for the lantern hanging by the door, lighting it with a flick of his thumb. The flame flickered to life, casting a warm glow that pushed back the encroaching darkness. With Roger at his side, Bill opened the stable door, revealing a space filled with old saddles, tools, and a few dusty horse blankets. He felt a twinge of unease, as if the very walls held their breath, waiting for the past to surface. He rummaged through the clutter, hoping to find some clue to the doctor's whereabouts, or perhaps something that would lead him to Clara's fate. "Look here, boy," Bill said, his voice a low murmur as he spotted an old trunk tucked away in the corner, partially hidden beneath a pile of moth-eaten blankets. The hinges protested as he lifted the lid, revealing a collection of old medical supplies, bandages, tinctures, and a well-worn leather bag. "Might belong to Dr. Hargrove himself," he speculated, holding up a small glass vial that shimmered in the lantern light. "This here looks like it might hold some secrets of its own." Roger's ears perked up, and he padded closer, sniffing the air with an intensity that made Bill's heart race. "What's got you all riled up now?" he chuckled, following the dog's lead as Roger darted to a nearby shelf, his nose pressed against an old, dusty ledger. "You think there's something in here?" With a deft hand, Bill pulled the ledger free, wiping away the layer of dust that had settled on its cover. The spine cracked as he opened it, revealing a series of neat entries detailing patients, ailments, and remedies. As he flipped through the pages, a name jumped out at him: Clara. The entry was dated just days before her disappearance. "By thunder!" he breathed, scanning the entry. She was sick, and Dr. Hargrove treated her. His pulse quickened as he continued reading, the ink revealing a tale of urgency. Clara had suffered from a mysterious illness that left her weak and feverish. Bill's brow furrowed as he turned to the next page, where he found a hastily scrawled note in the margins. "Something unnatural at play. Beware the shadows." Bill felt a chill creep up his spine, the words resonating deep within him. "Unnatural, eh?" he muttered, glancing at Roger, who was now sniffing around the ledger as if trying to piece together the puzzle himself. "Seems we're not just dealing with heartache and loss here, but something more sinister." With the ledger tucked safely under his arm, Bill exited the stables, his mind racing with possibilities. The night had deepened, and a heavy fog began to roll in, cloaking the land in an eerie silence. He could hear the distant hoot of an owl, the call echoing through the darkness, but it was the rustle of the wind through the trees that sent shivers down his spine. "Let's head over to the doctor's old place," he suggested, moving with purpose. "It's not far from here, and if Clara was treated there, maybe we'll find more answers." Roger barked in agreement, tail wagging, the faithful dog ever alert to their surroundings. As they made their way through the fog, Bill couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. Shadows slipping just beyond the reach of the lantern's light, the world around him seemed to breathe, the stillness heavy with secrets. When they reached the overgrown path leading to Dr. Hargrove's old homestead, Bill noticed how the moonlight filtered through the trees, illuminating the dilapidated structure that stood before them like a ghost from another time. The windows were dark, the door hanging slightly ajar, creaking in the wind like a beckoning call from the past. "Come on, Roger," Bill whispered, his heart pounding with a mix of excitement and trepidation. "Let's see what the good doctor's been keeping hidden." As they stepped inside, the smell of decay greeted them, an unsettling reminder of time's relentless march. Dust motes danced in the air, swirling in the lantern's glow as Bill scanned the room. There were remnants of a life once lived, an old rocking chair, a broken mirror, and scattered papers littering the floor, each one a testament to the past. Roger stood at the threshold, his body tense, nose twitching. "What is it, boy?" Bill asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Suddenly, the dog darted into a side room, barking urgently. Bill followed, the flickering light revealing a small study cluttered with books and papers, one particular sheet catching his eye. It was a map, old and yellowed, marked with various symbols and locations. But what sent a thrill of apprehension through him was the notation near the edge: "Cursed ground." "Cursed ground?" Bill echoed, his voice filled with disbelief. The hair on the back of his neck stood on end as Roger whined softly, a low growl bubbling up from his throat. "Looks like we're getting closer to the heart of this mystery, partner." The room felt charged with an unseen energy, and Bill knew they were on the verge of uncovering something profound, something that could explain Clara's fate and the shadows that haunted this forsaken place. As the lantern flickered ominously, casting long shadows across the walls, he felt a surge of determination rise within him. They would not rest until the truth was laid bare, no matter how dark or twisted it might be. "Let's keep looking, Roger," he said, the resolve in his voice firm. "We'll find Clara and we'll set things right." With a renewed sense of purpose, he pressed on, the echoes of the past guiding their way through the encroaching darkness. The air in the study grew thick with an unsettling quiet, as if the very walls were holding their breath. Bill leaned closer to the map, tracing the lines with his finger, Each symbol seemed to pulse with an energy all its own, and the notation of cursed ground sent a tremor through him. He had heard tales of cursed places, whispered around campfires by superstitious folks who believed in the unseen forces that roamed the earth. "Roger, what do you make of this?" Bill asked, glancing down at his loyal companion, who was now sniffing intently at a pile of old papers strewn about a desk. The dog's ears perked up, and he let out a low whine, his keen instincts picking up something Bill had yet to uncover. With a steadying breath, Bill moved toward Roger, who had discovered a tattered envelope nestled beneath a dusty tome. Bill knelt down and pulled it free, the paper crumbling slightly in his hands. He opened it with care, revealing a letter penned in a hurried scrawl. "Dear Clara," it began, the ink smudged as if written in a moment of great distress. "The shadows grow longer, and I fear for your safety. They watch from the edges of the night, waiting to claim what is not theirs. Meet me at the old willow by midnight. I have something that may save us both." "By the great wide open," Bill murmured, a sense of urgency swelling within him. "This ain't just a letter. It's a call for help." He looked to Roger, who was now sitting quietly, eyes fixed on Bill with an understanding that transcended words. "We need to find that willow, boy. It could lead us to Clara, or at least shine a light on what's going on here." Without wasting another moment, Bill folded the letter and tucked it safely into his coat pocket. He made his way back into the main room, the lantern casting flickering shadows that danced like specters against the wall. The fog outside had thickened, wrapping the homestead in an otherworldly embrace. "Let's move, Roger. We'll have to ride hard if we're to reach that willow before the witching hour," Bill said, his voice low but laced with determination. He felt the weight of the map in his mind, a map that led to answers buried deep in the earth. They stepped back into the night, the lantern's light flickering against the encroaching darkness. Bill mounted his horse, a sturdy bay named Jasper, while Roger hopped up beside him, ever the vigilant companion. He could feel the air crackle with tension as they set off, hooves pounding against the ground, sending small clouds of mist swirling in their wake. The ride through the fog felt like traversing a dreamscape, the familiar trail morphing into a twisted labyrinth. Bill's heart raced as he scanned the woods, half expecting to see shadowy figures lurking among the trees. The owls hooted their mournful tunes, echoing the unease that settled in his bones. "Keep sharp, Roger," he murmured, his voice barely rising above the sound of hooves. "We don't know what lurks in these shadows." The trees began to thin out, and soon enough, the silhouette of the old willow came into view, its gnarled branches reaching out like skeletal fingers. Bill dismounted, the ground beneath his boots soft and yielding. "This is it, partner," he said, squinting into the gloom. "Let's see what secrets this old tree holds." As they approached, Roger suddenly halted, tail raised and ears perked, his body tense as if sensing something ominous. Bill stopped too, a prickle of apprehension crawling up his spine. "What is it, boy?" he asked, the words barely escaping his lips. In the stillness, a low whisper seemed to dance on the wind, words indistinguishable but heavy with meaning. The lantern flickered violently, casting frantic shadows around them. "Clara!" Bill called out, his voice echoing against the hollow night, a plea tinged with desperation. To his astonishment, a figure emerged from behind the willow, a silhouette cloaked in shadows, indistinct yet undeniably human. Bill's heart raced as he stepped forward, gripping the hilt of his revolver instinctively. "Who goes there?" he demanded, his voice firm yet betraying the worry brewing within. The figure hesitated, then stepped into the light, revealing a young woman with haunted eyes, her skin pale as the moonlight. "I am Clara," she said, her voice trembling like autumn leaves. "You must help me." Bill's breath caught in his throat as he took in her appearance. She looked frail, as if the shadows had siphoned her strength. "Clara, what's happened to you?" he asked, his heart aching for the girl he had only heard whispers about. "There's something in the ground," she replied, glancing nervously toward the willow, as if fearing it might come alive. "Something that hungers. I tried to escape, but it won't let me go." "Good Lord," Bill breathed, glancing at Roger, who stood protectively by his side, sensing the gravity of the moment. "We need to get you away from here, but we can't leave without knowing what's going on." Clara nodded, her gaze drifting toward the tree. "It's tied to the land, to the people who came before. They summoned it and now it won't let me leave." The weight of her words settled heavily in the air, and Bill felt the ground beneath him pulse, almost as if it were alive. "Then we'll put an end to this," he vowed, steeling himself. "We'll find out what it wants and send it back to where it came from." As the first hints of dawn began to break on the horizon, the fog slowly receding, Bill knew they were just at the beginning of a battle that would test them all. With Clara's hand in his, they would face the darkness together, and for the first time, he believed they might just have a fighting chance against the shadows that threatened to consume them all. As the first rays of dawn began to chase away the shadows, Bill tightened his grip on Clara's hand, feeling the pulse of urgency in their shared resolve. The willow loomed like a sentinel over them, its gnarled branches trembling as if they were privy to secrets best left unspoken. Roger, always attuned to the unease that hung in the air, remained alert, his nose quivering as he sniffed at the damp earth. "Let's not waste no time," Bill said, his voice low but steady. "If there's something in that ground, we best find it before it gets any stronger." He gestured toward the tree, its bark twisted and knotted like an old man's face. "You reckon there's a way to get down to whatever it is?" Clara nodded, her eyes wide with both fear and determination. "I think it's buried deep, but there's a place, an old root cellar. It might lead us closer." "Lead the way, miss," Bill encouraged, his heart racing with the thought of what lay beneath their feet. With a determined stride, Clara moved toward the tree, her pale form almost ghost-like in the early morning light. Roger trotted at her heels, ever watchful, his ears perked up, attuned to the soft sounds of the forest waking around them. They reached the base of the willow, and Clara knelt beside a twisted root that jutted out of the earth. "Here," she said, brushing away the damp earth with trembling fingers. "If we dig down, we might find the entrance." Bill knelt beside her, his hands steady and practiced as he began to scrape away the loose soil. "If this don't give us a clue, I reckon we're in for a wild goose chase," he muttered, sweat beading on his brow despite the cool morning air. He glanced at Roger, who stood guard, his eyes scanning the horizon as if expecting trouble. "Keep watch, boy," Bill instructed, his voice firm yet kind. The dog, sensing the gravity of the moment, moved to a nearby rise, his posture alert, scanning for any signs of danger. As they dug, the soil shifted easily beneath their hands, and soon they uncovered a weathered wooden door, its surface marred with age and the dampness of the earth. Bill's heart raced as he cleared away the last remnants of dirt, revealing rusty iron hinges. "Would you look at that? Ain't this a fine find?" he said, brushing his hands on his jeans. "Let's see what's behind door number 1. With a firm tug, he pulled the door open, the sound echoing like a whisper in the stillness. A musty smell wafted up, thick with the scent of damp earth and something darker, something that sent a shiver racing down Bill's spine. "Keep your eyes peeled, Clara," he warned, glancing back at her. "I reckon we ain't the only ones interested in what's down there." Clara nodded, her breath hitching as she peered into the darkness. "It feels wrong," she whispered, "like it's watching us." "Just a bit of dirt and dust, I reckon," Bill said, trying to reassure her, though he felt a knot tightening in his gut. "But we've come too far to turn back now." He drew his revolver, the cold steel a comfort in his hand, and stepped cautiously into the cellar, the lantern illuminating the way. The space was cramped, walls lined with shelves that had long succumbed to decay. Old jars filled with murky liquid stood like sentinels, some shattered and spilling their contents onto the ground. Bill took a deep breath, the air heavy with secrets and long-buried memories. "Don't suppose you've been down here before?" he asked Clara, who followed closely behind, her eyes darting around nervously. "No, but I've heard stories," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "They say the old families who lived here used to practice dark rituals, things that should never be disturbed." Roger, still on guard, began to sniff around, his instincts kicking in. He paused at one corner, his ears pricking up, and let out a low growl, the sound reverberating against the stone walls. "What is it, boy?" Bill asked, moving closer to Roger, who was fixated on a spot where the ground seemed to have shifted. Bill knelt down, brushing aside the debris, revealing a series of strange symbols carved into the earth. The symbols looked ancient, foreign, like a language lost to time. "Look at this," Bill said, tracing one of the carvings with his finger. "It's like a warning, or a summoning." Clara leaned closer, her face pale but curious. "I've seen these before in the old town records," she said, her eyes widening. "They're related to the spirits of the land, entities that were meant to be left undisturbed." Bill's heart raced as he connected the dots. "So whatever's tied to you, it's tied to this place too. We need to figure out how to sever that connection." "Sever it?" Clara echoed, her voice trembling. "How?" Bill took a deep breath, determination hardening in his chest. "We need to find something that can bind it back, something at once." He glanced at Roger, who had moved a few steps away, sniffing at something on the ground. "What have you found, partner?" Roger stood over a small, twisted piece of metal, half buried in the dirt. Bill crouched down, picking it up, revealing a tarnished locket that shimmered with an eerie glow. "Now, ain't this a curious find?" he mused, turning it over in his hand. Clara's breath caught in her throat as she recognized it. "That belonged to my mother. I thought it was lost long ago." "Then it might be just what we need," Bill said, tucking the locket into his pocket. "We'll use it to draw out whatever's lurking here and send it back to the shadows it came from." With a shared glance of resolve, they prepared to face the darkness, knowing that time was running out and that the true nature of the malevolence haunting Clara would soon be revealed. As they climbed back out of the cellar, Roger stayed close, his presence a steadying force against the uncertainty that loomed like a storm on the horizon. The mist had fully lifted, and the day was dawning bright. But in Bill's heart, he felt the weight of the shadows still lurking just out of sight, waiting to be confronted. The sun climbed higher, casting long shadows over the barren landscape as Bill and Clara made their way back toward the old homestead. The air was crisp, yet a peculiar chill lingered, as if the remnants of the dark presence they had unearthed were clinging to them. Roger, ever watchful, trotted ahead, his nose to the ground, sniffing out the whispers of the land that had been long silenced. "Feels like we're in a hornet's nest, Clara," Bill said, his voice steady but laced with an undercurrent of concern. "Every step we take brings us closer to something we can't quite see." Clara nodded, her expression grave. "The locket, it might be the key, but it's also a beacon. If that entity is tied to it, we may be drawing it right to us." "Then we'll have to be quick about it," Bill replied, a fierce determination lighting his blue eyes. "Let's figure out how to use that trinket before it brings trouble we can't handle." They reached the porch of the old house, the wood creaking beneath their boots, a lament of sorts for the spirits that had once walked there. Bill stepped inside, scanning the dim interior with a practiced eye. Dust motes danced in the shafts of sunlight, streaming through the cracked windows, illuminating the remnants of a forgotten life. He walked toward the mantel, where a faded photograph hung crookedly, showing a family long lost to time. "Maybe we ought to dig into the old records," Clara suggested, glancing at the photograph. "There might be something in there about the family who lived here and what they were into." Good idea," Bill replied, moving over to the small desk that sat in the corner. He opened the drawer, finding it stuffed with yellowed papers and faded maps. "Let's see if we can't turn up some answers." Clara sifted through the papers, her fingers trembling as she unearthed the brittle pages. "There's something here about the rituals," she murmured, her brow furrowing in concentration. "They were said to be protective, but there are mentions of them going awry, sacrifices made in the dark to appease the spirits." "Sounds like a right mess," Bill said, leaning closer. "But if we can find out what they were trying to appease, we might understand what we're up against." Roger, having completed his own investigation of the room, returned to Clara's side, nudging her hand with his nose, as if sensing her rising anxiety. "You're a good boy," she whispered, patting him absent-mindedly. "You always know when things ain't quite right." Suddenly a low growl emanated from Roger's throat, an unsettling sound that sent a shiver down Bill's spine. "What is it, boy?" he asked, instinctively reaching for his revolver. Roger's gaze was fixed toward the back of the house, where shadows seemed to deepen, coiling like smoke in the corners. "We ought to check that out," Bill said, his heart pounding. "Stay close, Clara." They crept toward the back, the floorboards creaking under their weight. The room was filled with old furniture draped in white sheets, ghostly reminders of the lives that had once filled the space. Bill raised the lantern, illuminating a large wooden door that stood ajar, its hinges rusted from years of neglect. "Looks like we ain't alone after all," Bill muttered, glancing back at Clara, who swallowed hard. "Do you think it's it?" she whispered, fear etched in her features. "We'll find out soon enough," Bill replied, pushing the door open. It swung wide, revealing a darkened cellar that mirrored the one they had just left, but there was a palpable energy in the air, something almost electric. As they stepped inside, Roger's growl deepened, his body tense as he moved forward, sniffing the air with urgency. Bill followed, his senses heightened, feeling the hairs on the back of his neck stand on end. In the far corner, something glinted in the darkness, a piece of metal protruding from the dirt, similar to what they had uncovered before. "Another treasure?" Clara asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Let's hope it's a boon and not a curse," Bill replied, kneeling down to examine it. He dug his fingers into the soil, pulling free a rusted iron box, ornate with strange markings that matched those they had seen before. "What's that?" Clara breathed, stepping closer, her curiosity battling with her apprehension. "Only one way to find out," Bill said, working the latch free with a bit of effort. The lid creaked open, revealing a collection of small trinkets, bones, beads, and something that looked like a shrunken head wrapped in weathered leather. Clara recoiled, her eyes wide with horror. "What in tarnation is that?" "Looks like a warning," Bill muttered, his voice tense. "Whatever these folks were messing with, it was serious business. We need to be on our guard." Just then, Roger barked sharply, snapping their attention back to the door. A figure stood silhouetted against the dim light, a shadow that seemed to pulse and shift, its features indistinct but undeniably there. "Who's there?" Bill called out, raising his revolver, heart pounding like a runaway horse. The figure stepped forward, revealing a weathered face, but the eyes were hollow, darkened by something ancient and malevolent. "You shouldn't have come here," the voice rasped, echoing through the cellar, as if the very walls trembled at the sound. "You've disturbed the peace of the land, and now you must pay the price." Bill's grip tightened on his weapon as he felt the weight of the old locket in his pocket, a tether to both Clara's past and the dark forces that had awakened. He exchanged a glance with Clara, who stood rooted in place, fear and determination warring within her. "Whatever you are," Bill said, his voice steady despite the fear coursing through him, "we ain't afraid of you. We're here to set things right." The figure laughed, a sound that chilled the air. "You think you can control what lies beneath? You've only just begun to scratch the surface." With a swift motion, it raised a hand, and the shadows in the cellar surged forward, swirling like a tempest, ready to swallow them whole. Bill fired a shot into the darkness, but it felt like shooting at the wind, ineffectual and futile. "Clara!" he shouted. But the shadows coiled around them and the world spun, reality blurring into chaos as the entity's laughter echoed in their ears, a haunting reminder that their battle had only just begun. The shadows writhed around Bill and Clara, tendrils of darkness that seemed to pulse with a life of their own. Bill felt a surge of adrenaline, the instinct to protect rising within him like a wild stallion. He could hear the distant echoes of Clara's breath hitching, a sound that tugged at his heart. He had to get them both out of this mess. "Roger!" he shouted, summoning the old dog's loyalty. The hound stood firm, his hackles raised, an anchor in the storm of swirling shadows. Roger let out a fierce bark, his voice cutting through the darkness like a knife. Bill could sense the dog's instincts sharpening, a warning that vibrated through the air. With a deep breath, Bill turned to face the swirling mass. "What do you want from us?" he demanded, squaring his shoulders. "We ain't here to cause no trouble, just looking for answers." The figure seemed to hesitate, the shadows flickering momentarily, revealing more of its twisted form. "Answers!" it rasped, its hollow eyes boring into Bill's soul. "You seek answers, yet you do not know the price of knowledge. You tread on ground stained by blood and betrayal." The air thickened with a foul odor, as if the very essence of the earth had come alive to warn them. Clara moved closer to Bill, her fingers trembling as she gripped his arm. "What do we do?" she whispered, her voice barely above a breath. Bill scanned the cellar, his mind racing. He had dealt with men who were ruthless, but this was something altogether different. He needed to ground himself in the practical, something he could understand. "We need to find out what this thing wants, and we need to do it fast," he said, focusing on the iron box still resting at their feet. "Look!" Clara pointed at Roger, who was now sniffing the ground intently, his nose wriggling as he searched for something buried in the dirt. Bill felt a spark of hope. If Roger was onto something, it could be the clue they desperately needed. "Good boy," Bill encouraged, kneeling beside the dog. "What have you found?" Roger pawed at the dirt, sending small clumps flying until he unearthed a piece of leather, worn and cracked. Bill picked it up, examining the strange symbols etched into its surface. "This ain't just any leather," he muttered. "It's part of something bigger." "What do you mean?" Clara asked. Her curiosity piqued despite the looming darkness. "I reckon it's a binding," Bill said, holding it up to the lantern light. "Could be a charm or a seal. Whatever that spirit is, it's been kept at bay by this very thing." He glanced at the figure, which seemed to writhe in agitation. "Maybe this is the answer we're looking for." Before Clara could respond, the shadows roared, swirling around them like a tempest. "You cannot understand the bond you break," the figure screamed, its voice echoing with fury. "You've disturbed the resting place of the Forsaken, and now you'll pay." Bill pressed the leather binding closer to the lantern, the symbols glowing faintly as if responding to the light. "Clara, we need to hold this up to the creature. It might weaken it." "Are you crazy?" she exclaimed, her eyes wide. "What if it only makes it angrier?" "Better than standing here like a pair of fools," Bill shot back, determination igniting his spirit. "We don't have much choice." With the shadows lunging forward, threatening to engulf them, Bill positioned the leather toward the figure. "Whatever you are, we're here to put things back in order. You've no power over us if we know the truth." The figure halted, its form flickering between visibility and shadow. "You think you can wield the past? You don't know what forces you're meddling with," it hissed, a mix of anger and fear in its tone. As Bill held the leather up, the symbols began to shimmer, a soft light radiating from them. Roger barked again, his voice echoing through the cellar, and the shadows began to recede, as if recoiling from the brightness. "Keep it steady," Clara urged, her eyes locked on the shifting entity. "Whatever you do, don't let it drop." But the figure was relentless, extending a hand toward them, and Bill could feel the oppressive weight of the darkness trying to pull him in. "You cannot resist," it roared, and for a moment the very air felt heavy, as if the world were trying to crush them. Then, amidst the chaos, a glint caught Bill's eye. The iron box lay partially open at his feet, and a flicker of light emanated from within. He bent down and peered inside, heart racing as he saw something else nestled among the trinkets, a small silver locket, identical to the one Clara had held earlier. "Clara!" he shouted, reaching for it. "This might be the key." As he lifted the locket, a wave of warmth washed over him, and the shadows shrank back, writhing as if in pain. The figure let out a wail that echoed through the cellar, a sound that sent chills racing down Bill's spine. "Do you see now?" it shrieked, desperation creeping into its voice. "You cannot unearth what is meant to stay buried." But Bill felt a surge of strength as he clutched the locket tightly, the warmth spreading through his fingertips. "We're here to set things right," he shouted back, defiance blazing in his eyes. "Together!" Clara echoed, stepping closer, emboldened by Bill's resolve. With one last desperate howl, the figure lunged, but the light from the locket flared, illuminating the cellar in a brilliant glow. The shadows dissipated like mist in the morning sun, and the figure was forced to retreat, its screams fading into the ether. As the last tendrils of darkness slipped away, Bill and Clara stood there, breathless and wide-eyed, the cellar now bathed in a gentle light. Roger, his body relaxing, wagged his tail, relief washing over him. "What just happened?" Clara asked, glancing at the remnants of the shadows that clung stubbornly to the corners of the room. Bill looked at the locket in his hand, still warm and pulsing with a soft light. "I reckon we just stirred up something that shouldn't have been disturbed. But I feel like we're closer to the truth than ever before." The echoes of the past lingered in the air, and as they stood together, the bond of their small family felt stronger than ever. They still had questions, and the mystery was far from over. But Bill was certain of one thing: they were not done yet. The land had its secrets, and they were determined to uncover every last one, no matter the cost. The cellar was now a sanctuary of light, the remnants of shadows fading into the woodwork as Bill and Clara took a moment to catch their breath. Roger, ever vigilant, sniffed the air, his ears perked up as he surveyed their surroundings. The dog had always been sharp as a tack, and Bill felt a swell of gratitude for the loyal creature. He reached down to ruffle Roger's fur, grounding himself amidst the lingering unease that settled over them like a heavy quilt. "Bill," Clara said, her voice breaking the stillness, "what do we do with that locket? It feels like it's alive." She peered at it, her brow furrowed with concern. "Guess we'll have to find out," Bill responded, turning the silver locket over in his hands. It glimmered with an otherworldly sheen, a stark contrast to the dust and decay of the cellar. "But first, we ought to see what else is hiding in this old place." With a nod, Clara stepped cautiously toward the far wall, her lantern casting flickering shadows that danced like spirits on the wooden beams. Bill followed, locket still clutched tight, his heart thumping like a horse galloping across the prairie. The air felt charged, as if the very walls of the cellar were whispering secrets he was meant to hear. As they moved deeper into the room, the floorboards creaked beneath their weight, each sound echoing like a warning bell. Bill's eyes scanned the clutter of the cellar, old tools, broken furniture, and the remnants of what once might have been a storeroom for the old homestead. He felt the presence of history thick in the air, heavy with stories untold. Roger trotted ahead, his nose to the ground, darting from one corner to another, clearly detecting something amiss. "What's got you all riled up, boy?" Bill asked, his voice low and steady. The dog halted, his ears twitching toward a shadowy nook in the far corner, a space that had gone unnoticed until now. The lantern light flickered, revealing a pile of old crates stacked haphazardly against the wall. "Looky there," Clara pointed, her voice a mix of curiosity and apprehension. "What do you reckon is in those?" Only one way to find out. Bill crouched down, the locket still warm in his pocket, and began to pry open the top crate. The wood was weathered and splintered, a testament to years of neglect. As he opened it, a cloud of dust erupted, filling the air with the scent of earth and decay. Inside, he found an assortment of items, a rusted horseshoe, a faded photograph of a family, and an old journal, its cover cracked and leather-bound. Bill carefully lifted the journal, brushing off the dust with a gentle hand. "This might be worth a look," he murmured, feeling the weight of it in his palm. Clara leaned closer, peering over his shoulder as he opened the journal, the pages yellowed with age. The handwriting was neat, almost delicate, and as Bill read the first few lines, he could hear the voice of the past echoing in his mind. "The darkness came for my brother on a night much like this. We hid the truth, thinking we could keep it at bay. But the land remembers." "Good Lord," Clara whispered, her eyes widening. "What if this is connected to that spirit? What if the brother they speak of is the same one we just encountered?" Bill nodded, feeling the chill of realization creeping up his spine. "Seems like we're onto something big here. Let's see what else this journal has to say." He turned the pages carefully, scanning for anything that might shed light on the creature they had just faced. As he read, the tale unfolded, a family cursed by a dark pact made long ago, seeking power at the cost of their own kin. The more he read, the more he felt the shadows creeping back, the air thick with tension. "Clara, it speaks of a ritual to bind the spirit. Says it can be undone if the truth is revealed, but it'll take courage and it ain't gonna be easy." Roger, sensing the gravity of the situation, growled low in his throat, his stance alert. Bill could see the dog's instincts were kicking in, and it reminded him of the bond they shared, how Roger always seemed to know when trouble was brewing. "Courage, huh?" Clara said, her voice steady despite the uncertainty in her eyes. "I reckon we've got that in spades. We just need to figure out the next step." Bill snapped the journal shut, determination rising within him like a flame. "We'll need to gather whatever we can find that connects to this family. Maybe there are more clues out there, or folks who remember their story." "Then we best get to it," Clara replied, her spirit ignited by the thrill of discovery. "But first, let's not forget about that locket. We should see if it has any markings or inscriptions." Bill took it out once more, holding it up to the lantern light. The symbols that adorned it danced with a light of their own, pulsing in time with the rhythm of his heart. If this locket belonged to the family, it could be the key to understanding the spirit's wrath. Suddenly, Roger barked sharply, his gaze fixed on the far wall, where the shadows seemed to quiver, as if they were alive again. "Let's not dally then," Bill said, a sense of urgency creeping into his voice. "The past has a way of catching up with folks, and I reckon it ain't done with us yet." With that, they steeled themselves, ready to confront whatever lay ahead. Together, they took a step into the unknown, each heartbeat echoing the promise of a mystery yet unsolved. The locket's glow illuminating the path forward. The frontier stretched out before them, wild and untamed, holding its breath for the revelation that was to come. As the lantern light flickered, casting elongated shadows against the rough wooden walls, Bill felt the weight of the locket in his hand, like a heartbeat pulsing with promise. The air around them was thick with dust and uncertainty, but his resolve only hardened. "We need to find out where this family lived," he said, glancing at Clara. "Could be their homestead is still standing nearby, or maybe there's a neighbor who remembers them." Clara nodded, her eyes sharp with purpose. "Ain't nothing like the stories passed down by old-timers. They know more than they let on." She ran a hand through her hair, tucking a loose strand behind her ear. "But we ought to be careful. If this family made a pact, who knows what else might still be lingering in these parts?" Roger, ever the vigilant companion, sniffed the air, his ears perked high as if he were listening for whispers in the breeze. The dog's instinct seemed heightened, as if he sensed the echoes of the past that still roamed the night. Bill admired the animal's loyalty. Roger was more than just a dog. He was a guardian, a partner in this mysterious hunt. "Let's start by checking out the town," Bill suggested, glancing back toward the door. "Folks around these parts might have heard something. Maybe there's even a record or two at the sheriff's office." As they stepped out into the cool night air, the vastness of the frontier enveloped them. The moon hung high, its silver light bathing the landscape in a ghostly glow. The scent of sagebrush and earth filled Bill's lungs, grounding him in the moment. He looked down at Roger, who trotted beside him, his nose to the ground, sniffing out trails both old and new. The town was quiet, the only sounds being the distant hoot of an owl and the rustle of wind through the cottonwoods. Clara walked with a determined stride, her eyes scanning for any sign of life. "Wonder what folks think of the old family," she mused aloud, her voice barely a whisper. "They might still be talking about the day the darkness took 'em." "I reckon they are," Bill replied, glancing at the few lights flickering in the windows of the saloon and general store. "We'll start at the sheriff's office. If anyone's got stories to share, it'll be him." As they approached the modest wooden building, Bill's heart raced with a mix of excitement and apprehension. He pushed open the door, the creak of the hinges echoing in the stillness. The sheriff, a stout man with a grizzled beard and eyes like faded blue denim, looked up from his desk, surprise flickering across his face. "Evening, Bill. Clara," he said, setting down a cup of coffee. "What brings you two out this late? Ain't nothing good happening after dark round these parts." "Evening, Sheriff," Bill replied, stepping forward. "We found something at the auction today, an old journal and this locket. Thought you might know a thing or two about the family it belonged to." The sheriff leaned forward, his brows furrowing as he examined the locket. "This here looks familiar," he said slowly, turning it over in his hand. "Belonged to the Hargrove family. A real tragic tale, if I recall." "Tragic how?" Clara asked, leaning closer, her curiosity piqued. The sheriff sighed, his gaze drifting to the window where the moonlight illuminated the dusty street. "Folks said they struck a deal with something dark. Power, prosperity, whatever they wanted came at a price. Then one night they just vanished. Only their house remained, sitting silent like a tomb. People claimed they could hear the echoes of their sorrow on certain nights, like a ghostly wail carried by the wind." Bill exchanged glances with Clara, the weight of the sheriff's words sinking deep. "Is that house still there? We need to see it." "Sure is," the sheriff replied, his tone turning grave. "But I'd think twice before you go poking around. Some say it's cursed. Ain't nobody who's gone near it ever come back with their wits about 'em. You might stir up more than you bargained for." "Curses don't scare us, Sheriff," Bill said, his voice steady. "We've faced down worse than whispers in the dark. We need to know the truth." The sheriff nodded, respect shining in his weary eyes. "Just promise me you'll be careful. There's a reason folks steer clear of that place." "He." With their next destination in mind, Bill and Clara left the sheriff's office, stepping back into the cool night. Roger, still alert, sniffed the air again, as if sensing the weight of the past in the atmosphere. "Let's head over to the Hargrove place," Clara said, her voice a mix of excitement and trepidation. "We might find the answers we're looking for." As they walked toward the outskirts of town, the landscape began to shift. The buildings grew sparse, replaced by open fields and the silhouette of distant hills. The sound of their footsteps crunched against the gravel road, each sound echoing into the vastness of the night. "Do you think the spirit will be waiting for us?" Clara asked, glancing at Bill, her eyes wide with anticipation and fear. "Could be," he replied, "but we're not going in blind. We've got the journal, the locket, and each other. Whatever it is, we'll face it together." Just then, Roger halted, his body tense as he sniffed the air with newfound intensity. Bill crouched down beside him, noting the way the dog's ears perked up, alert to something beyond their sight. "What is it, boy?" he murmured, feeling a chill creep down his spine. The dog's growl reverberated in the stillness, a low rumble that hinted at something lurking just beyond the edge of their perception. As the night deepened, the shadows seemed to stretch longer and the air thickened with unspoken secrets. "Let's keep moving," Bill urged, his heart racing. The pull of the unknown was drawing them closer to the heart of the mystery, a place where darkness lingered, waiting for the brave or the foolish to step into its embrace. The moon hung high, casting a silver sheen over the landscape, illuminating the path ahead while deepening the shadows that flanked either side. Bill kept a steady pace, his eyes darting toward the hills, as if expecting something to leap from the darkness. Clara walked beside him, her breath coming in short puffs of mist as the night air chilled their skin. Roger trotted ahead, nose to the ground, his instincts guiding him like a compass through the unseen. As they drew closer to the Hargrove homestead, the air grew thicker, laden with a palpable tension that seemed to hum against the backdrop of the silent night. Bill's thoughts raced, piecing together the fragments of the sheriff's story with each step, He had always been a practical man, relying on his senses and the tools at hand to uncover the truth. This time would be no different. "All right, Clara," he said, lowering his voice as they reached the edge of the property. "Let's check our surroundings before we go in. The old man might have had a few tricks up his sleeve." Clara nodded, her eyes narrowing as she surveyed the dilapidated structure looming before them. The house was a mere shadow against the night sky, its wooden beams weathered and splintered like the bones of a long-forgotten giant. The roof sagged in defeat, and the windows, dark and empty, stared out like hollow eyes, watching their every move. Bill knelt near the overgrown path leading to the front door, his fingers brushing the coarse earth. "Look here." He pointed out small, scattered stones that had been disturbed. "Seems like folks have been here before us. Might have been wanderers, or maybe folks trying to uncover the past. Either way, they didn't leave a trace." Clara crouched beside him, her hand hovering over the ground. "You think they found anything?" "Could be," he replied, casting a wary glance at the house. "But I reckon whatever's in there won't be too happy to see us." He pulled out the journal, its leather cover worn and soft from years of neglect. "Let's see if this can shed any light." With a flick of his wrist, Bill opened the journal to the first page, the musty scent of old paper filling the air. It was written in a delicate hand, the ink faded but still legible. He scanned the words, taking in snippets of life from a family that had once thrived in this place. The entries spoke of prosperity, joy, and a deepening darkness that began to creep into their lives. "Here," he said, pointing to a passage. "Seems the Hargroves had a neighbor, old Tom Fletcher. Said he had a knack for divination, and folks would come from miles around for his counsel, but then things turned sour." "What do you mean?" Clara asked, leaning closer, eyes wide. "Listen to this. As the moon wanes, the shadows grow long, and the whispers of the night call for something from me. I fear Tom has bargained with forces he cannot control." Bill frowned, flipping the page. "That's not the kind of talk you want to hear." Roger, having returned from his exploration of the yard, let out a low growl, his eyes fixed on the house with a fierceness that sent a shiver down Clara's spine. "Easy there, boy," she said softly, reaching down to scratch behind his ears. "What do you see?" Just then, a faint rustle echoed from inside the house, like the sigh of a breath held too long. Bill's heart raced. "Did you hear that?" "Sure did," Clara whispered, her voice barely above a murmur. "Sounds like we ain't alone." "Stay close and keep your wits about you," Bill instructed, his voice firm. He led the way to the front door, which hung ajar, creaking ominously as he pushed it open wider. The air inside was stale, thick with dust, and a sense of abandonment that pressed against them like a weight. As they stepped across the threshold, Roger moved ahead, sniffing the air, his instincts sharper than the sharpest knife. The floorboards groaned underfoot, and the shadows seemed to shift as they moved deeper into the house. Bill's eyes adjusted to the dim light filtering through the cracked windows, revealing a parlor filled with forgotten furniture, the remnants of a life long gone. Clara stepped up beside him, her eyes scanning the room. "It's like time just stopped here," she murmured, brushing her fingers along the back of a tattered armchair, its fabric frayed but still sturdy. "I can't help but wonder what happened to them." "Let's find out," Bill replied, his determination unwavering. He moved toward a large, dust-covered cabinet against the wall. "Might be some more clues in here." He opened the cabinet doors, revealing a collection of dusty trinkets and old photographs, their faces blurred by time, but still holding a hint of vitality. Bill picked one up, a picture of the Hargrove family standing proudly in front of their home, smiles bright against the backdrop of a setting sun. "Look at this," he said, showing Clara. "They were a happy bunch. It's hard to believe darkness could take them like the sheriff said." As Clara examined the photograph, Roger sniffed at the floorboards, his attention fixated on a spot near the fireplace. Bill turned to follow the dog's gaze, curiosity piqued. Roger's growl deepened, a low, rumbling warning that echoed in the stillness. "Something's not right," Bill said, moving cautiously toward the fireplace. The stones were cold to the touch, but as he knelt, he noticed something glinting among the ashes. "Clara, come look at this," he called, brushing away the soot to reveal a small silver key. It was tarnished, but still intact, its intricate design hinting at a purpose long forgotten. "What do you think it opens?" Clara asked, her eyes wide with intrigue as she knelt beside him. Bill held the key up, turning it in the light. "Could be anything. A chest, a hidden door. But whatever it is, it might just lead us to the truth about the Hargroves." With the key in hand and their hearts pounding, they exchanged a glance, both aware that the darkness of the Hargrove legacy beckoned them deeper into the shadows. Roger barked softly, his head tilted, as if sensing the weight of their discovery. "Let's keep looking, partner," Bill said, standing up, the old wood creaking beneath him. "Whatever secrets this house holds, we're fixing to find them." As they moved deeper into the house, the air thickened, shadows playing tricks on their eyes, and the whispers of the past began to swirl around them, urging them to uncover what lay hidden in the corners of the old Hargrove home. Bill could feel the weight of the silver key in his pocket, a tangible reminder that secrets lay just beyond their reach. He exchanged a glance with Clara, the kind that spoke volumes without a single word. The shadows of the Hargrove house pressed in around them, and Roger's keen senses were a constant reminder that they weren't entirely alone. "Keep your eyes peeled, Clara," Bill said, his voice low as he led the way through a narrow hallway lined with faded portraits of long-dead ancestors. Each face seemed to follow their movements, eyes wide and staring, as if warning them to turn back. The air was thick with the scent of aged wood and something else, something that tickled at the back of Bill's mind, a hint of something sweet and rotting. As they reached the end of the hall, a door loomed ahead, its wood weathered and cracked, as if it hadn't been opened in years. Bill approached it cautiously, his hand hovering over the doorknob. "This here might be where they kept their secrets," he muttered. Clara nodded, her breath caught in her throat as they shared a moment of trepidation. "On three, then," she suggested, her voice barely above a whisper. "1, 2, 3. With a shove, Bill pushed the door open, its hinges creaking like an old man's bones. The room beyond was dim, the only light spilling in from a grimy window. Dust motes danced in the shafts of light, swirling like tiny spirits as they crossed the threshold. A tattered quilt lay draped over a small bed, and an old trunk rested against the far wall, its lock rusted and stubborn. Roger stepped forward, his nose twitching as he sniffed the air. He moved cautiously, ears perked and tail held low, embodying the essence of a hound on a scent. Bill observed the dog's behavior with an appreciative nod. Roger was more than just a companion. He was a guardian. "Looks like we found ourselves a treasure chest," Clara remarked, eyes gleaming with excitement. She approached the trunk, kneeling beside it. "What do you reckon is in there?" "Could be anything," Bill replied, stepping closer. "Might just be some old clothes or letters, but it could also hold answers to what happened here." With a careful tug, Clara grasped the lid and lifted it slowly. Dust billowed into the air, and they both coughed, the particles swirling around them. Inside, they found a collection of faded journals, their leather covers cracked but still intact. Clara's hands trembled slightly as she lifted one out, the pages yellowed and fragile. "Listen to this," she said, opening the journal to a random entry. "It's dated a year before they vanished. The nights grow longer, and I hear whispers in the wind. I fear the shadows are growing bold, and I am not alone." The tension in the room thickened, and Bill felt a chill run down his spine. Whispers in the wind. Sounds like the kind of trouble that don't just go away. Clara turned another page, her brow furrowing deeper. "There's more. Tom has made a pact, and I fear he's lost his way. The spirits call for him, and he can't resist their pull." "Tom Hargrove," Bill murmured, piecing together the fragments of the past. "He was the one folks said had a knack for divination. Could be he got tangled up with something darker than he bargained for." Roger, still alert, turned his head toward the door as if he sensed something beyond the confines of the room. Bill shared a knowing glance with Clara, both realizing that whatever had transpired here was far from over. "Let's not linger too long, Clara," he said, his voice firm. "The more we dig, the deeper this mystery gets." As they prepared to leave the room, Roger barked sharply, the sound echoing in the stillness. Bill's heart raced. "What is it, boy?" Without hesitation, Roger darted out of the room, his instincts guiding him toward the main hall. Bill and Clara exchanged worried glances before following the dog, curiosity mingling with fear. They rushed into the hallway, where the air felt charged, as if a storm was brewing just beyond the horizon. Roger was standing near the front door, his eyes fixed on something outside. Bill stepped closer, peering through the grimy glass. The sight that met his eyes sent a jolt of adrenaline through him. A figure stood in the yard, cloaked in shadows, their features obscured. Bill's heart thudded like a drum, and a chill raced down his spine. "Who in tarnation is that?" Clara whispered, gripping Bill's arm tightly. "Don't know, but we best not stick around to find out," Bill replied, instincts honed from years on the frontier kicking in. "Let's back away slowly and head to the barn. We might be able to find a way to get out of here." As they retreated into the house, Roger kept a vigilant watch, the hair along his back standing on end. Clara held the journal close, the pages a tangible connection to the mysteries that danced just beyond their reach. The figure outside shifted, moving closer, and Bill felt a wave of urgency wash over him. The shadows around them seemed to breathe, and he knew they had stumbled upon something they were never meant to uncover. "We need to figure this out, and quick," he said, his voice resolute. "Whatever's out there, it might just be connected to the Hargroves, and we ain't about to let it get the best of us." With a final glance toward the door, Bill led Clara and Roger toward the barn, a place where they could regroup and strategize. The air outside was heavy with tension, and the whispers of the past echoed in their ears, urging them to unravel the truth before it was too late. The barn loomed ahead, its weathered wooden walls standing tall against the encroaching shadows. Bill pushed open the creaking door, its hinges groaning like an old man waking from a long slumber. Inside, the scent of hay and horses mingled with the faint, musty aroma of aged wood. Dust motes danced lazily in the fading light, providing a stark contrast to the unease that had settled in the pit of his stomach. "Keep your voice down, Clara," Bill whispered as they stepped cautiously inside. The dog had already darted in ahead of them, his nose working furiously as he sniffed out every nook and cranny. Roger's instincts were sharp, and Bill trusted the hound to alert them of any danger lurking nearby. Clara crouched beside a weathered saddle, resting against the wall. "What if that figure out there is connected to the Hargroves?" she mused, her voice barely above a whisper. "Maybe it's someone who knows what happened." "No, could be," Bill replied, his brow furrowing as he scanned the dim interior. "But we best be careful. Folks don't just vanish into thin air without leaving behind some sort of trail." As Roger continued his patrol, Bill moved toward a dusty workbench cluttered with tools. He picked up an old lantern, its glass cracked but still salvageable. He struck a match and lit it, casting flickering shadows across the barn. The light revealed a few more items, a set of horseshoes, a rusted branding iron, and something that made Bill's heart skip a beat. An old rifle propped up against the wall, its barrel caked with rust, but still sturdy. "Look here, Clara," he said, motioning her over. "This ain't just any rifle. This is a Remington rolling block, a fine piece of machinery, but it's seen better days." Clara ran her fingers along the barrel. "You reckon it belonged to Tom?" "Could be," Bill said thoughtfully. If he was hunting for answers, he might have needed it to protect himself from whatever shadows he stirred up. He glanced around the barn again, the light casting long, eerie shapes. "Let's keep our eyes peeled. Something tells me we're in the thick of it now." Just then, Roger stopped and growled low in his throat, the hair on his back standing up like a porcupine. He turned sharply, fixating on the barn door. Bill's heart raced, and he instinctively moved closer to Clara, the grip on the rifle tightening. "Easy, boy," he murmured, trying to calm the hound. "What do you see?" Before Roger could answer, the door creaked open, and the figure from the yard stepped inside, silhouetted against the fading light. Bill's heart pounded like a stampede, and he stepped protectively in front of Clara, rifle ready. "Who goes there?" he called out, trying to steady his voice. The figure paused, and as the lantern light illuminated the face, Bill felt a shiver run through him. It was a woman, her hair as white as snow, but her eyes gleamed with a fierce vitality. She wore a long coat that fluttered around her like a ghostly shroud, and her presence seemed to draw the very shadows closer. "I mean you no harm," she said, her voice smooth yet carrying the weight of ages. "But I come with a warning." "What's your business here?" Bill asked, not lowering the rifle. "You're trespassing on private property." The woman stepped forward, her gaze unwavering. "I am here because you've stirred the spirits. They've been restless since you uncovered the journals. The past is clawing its way back to the present, and it won't rest until it has what it wants." Clara gasped softly, and Roger growled again, though the intensity had dulled just a touch. The atmosphere thickened, and Bill felt a mix of disbelief and intrigue. "Spirits? What are you talking about?" "The Hargroves made a pact," the woman continued, her voice low and melodic. "Tom's bargain with the unseen has consequences that ripple through time. If you do not tread carefully, you will find yourselves ensnared in the same fate that befell them." "Why should we believe you?" Bill countered, his eyes narrowing. "For all we know, you could be part of the trouble we're trying to unravel." "I am not your enemy," she insisted, her eyes boring into his. "I merely seek to guide you. The darkness that looms is not of this world. It whispers and calls to those who are lost, and it hungers for souls like yours." Clara took a step closer to Bill, her expression a mix of fear and fascination. "What do we need to do?" she asked, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. The woman smiled faintly, a glimmer of understanding in her eyes. "You must seek the truth hidden beneath the earth. The answers lie not just in the journals, but in the land itself. Return to the homestead where they lived. There you will find what you need to set things right." "Why would you help us?" Bill asked, still unsure whether to trust this spectral figure. "Because I too was lost once," she replied, her voice softening. "The past binds us all, and if you can untangle it, perhaps I shall find peace as well." With that, the woman stepped back, fading into the shadows like a wisp of smoke, leaving only the echo of her warning in the still air. Bill lowered the rifle, his breath coming in slow, measured gasps. "What in tarnation just happened?" Clara shook her head, eyes wide. "I don't know, but I think we need to follow her advice. We've come too far to turn back now." Roger, having calmed, let out a low whine, as if he too sensed the weight of their next decision. "Then let's saddle up," Bill said, resolve flooding through him. "We'll head to that homestead and see if we can get to the bottom of this mystery. Whatever it is, we'll face it together." As they gathered their gear, the barn's shadows seemed to whisper around them, the past intertwining with the present, urging them on toward their destiny. The frontier was vast and unforgiving, but with courage, loyalty, and the promise of discovery, they were determined to unearth the truth hidden in the depths of time. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over the land, Bill and Clara mounted their horses, the air thick with anticipation. Roger trotted alongside them, his nose twitching, alert for any sign of danger. The path to the old Hargrove homestead lay ahead, swallowed by the encroaching night, and Bill could feel the weight of the woman's words hanging over him like a storm cloud. "Keep your eyes peeled, Clara," he instructed, his voice steady despite the fluttering in his stomach. "If that specter of a woman is right, we're likely to stir up some old spirits tonight." Clara nodded, her grip tightening on the reins. "I just hope whatever it is we find can be reasoned with. I'd rather not tussle with anything we can't see." With a final glance back at the barn, which now loomed like a great beast in the fading light, they set off. The rhythmic sound of hooves on packed earth mingled with the soft rustle of leaves, creating a symphony of nature that felt both comforting and foreboding. As they rode, the landscape transformed around them. The flat plains began to rise, the ground undulating in gentle hills that led to the remnants of the Hargrove estate. The ghostly silhouette of the house came into view, its frame sagging under the weight of years gone by. It stood in stark contrast against the twilight sky, a decaying monument to a time long past. Roger suddenly halted, ears perked and nose lifted to the breeze. He whined softly, his eyes darting toward the woods that flanked the homestead. Bill felt the tension in the air thicken, as if the very land was holding its breath. "What is it, boy?" he asked, sliding off his horse. "What do you see?" With a cautious step, Roger moved forward, sniffing the ground. He stopped abruptly and let out a low growl, a sound that sent chills racing down Bill's spine. "Stay close, Clara," Bill said, moving beside Roger. "Whatever's got his hackles raised can't be good news." Clara dismounted, her eyes scanning the surroundings. "Do you think it could be the spirits she mentioned?" "I reckon we'll find out soon enough," Bill replied, his voice steady. He knelt down, examining the ground where Roger had sniffed. There, half buried in the dirt, he found a tattered piece of cloth, its color faded but unmistakably patterned, a remnant of a woman's dress. "Look at this," he said, holding it up for Clara to see. "This could be from the Hargrove family. If they made a pact, maybe they left something behind." Clara's brow furrowed as she approached, her fingers brushing against the frayed edges. "What do you suppose it means? Is it a warning or a clue?" "Hard to say," Bill replied, his mind racing, "but it looks like we might find more answers inside that old house. Let's go see if we can turn up any more of their secrets." With Roger leading the way, they crept toward the door of the homestead, which hung ajar, creaking on its rusted hinges as if inviting them in. The air inside was stale, thick with the scent of dust and decay. Bill pushed the door wider, glancing at Clara. "Stick close," he whispered, stepping inside. The dim light from the moon, streaming through the broken windows, illuminated the remnants of a life once lived here. Faded photographs on the walls, empty chairs draped in cobwebs, and a fireplace that stood cold and dark. Roger moved cautiously, sniffing at corners and sniffing the air, his instincts razor-sharp. Bill felt a chill creep down his spine, a sense of being watched, as if the very walls were alive with memories. "Search around for anything that might help us," he instructed Clara. "Check the kitchen, I'll take a look upstairs." As he climbed the creaking staircase, each step echoing like a gunshot in the silence, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was stepping into the past. The air grew colder, and a shiver danced along his skin. He reached the landing and peered into the first room, the door half open. Inside, he found a bedroom, the bed still made but covered in a thick layer of dust. A trunk sat at the foot, its lock rusted but the wood sturdy. Bill knelt down, examining it closely. "Might be worth a try," he muttered, reaching for the latch. Just then, a sudden noise from below made him freeze. It was Clara's voice, sharp and filled with urgency. "Bill, get down here!" His heart raced as he rushed back down the stairs, the unease settling deep in his gut. As he reached the bottom, he found Clara standing by the kitchen door, her face pale. "You need to see this." He hurried to her side, and Roger was standing still, staring into the shadows of the kitchen. Clara pointed toward the floor, her voice a whisper. "I found something." There, etched into the wooden floorboards, was a strange symbol, a swirling design that seemed to pulse with a life of its own. It glimmered faintly in the dim light, a mark that felt both ancient and alive. "What in tarnation is that?" Bill asked, kneeling beside it. The symbol looked like a spiral, intertwined with other shapes, reminiscent of the sun and moon. "I don't know," Clara replied, her voice trembling slightly. "But it's like it's calling out to us. Do you think it's part of the pact she spoke of?" Roger sniffed at the mark, then looked up at Bill, his eyes shining with intelligence. "We best figure out what it means," Bill said, feeling the weight of the moment settle on his shoulders. "If this is the key to the Hargroves' fate, we can't afford to miss it." As they stood there, the house seemed to come alive around them, the air thickening with a palpable tension, as if the spirits of the past were awakening from their slumber, watching and waiting. The shadows lengthened, and the whispered secrets of the Hargrove homestead began to unfurl, inviting them deeper into a mystery that threatened to consume them whole. The air hung thick and heavy in the old Hargrove homestead, as if the very walls were steeped in the weight of secrets long buried. Bill knelt close to the swirling symbol, feeling the cool wood beneath his fingers. There was an undeniable energy radiating from it, a pulse that seemed to resonate with the very beat of the earth. He could hardly shake the feeling that this was no ordinary mark, perhaps a remnant of the pact Clara had mentioned, or something darker still. "What do you reckon it means?" Clara asked, her voice low and steady, though her eyes betrayed a flicker of fear. "Don't rightly know, but I've seen my fair share of strange things out here," Bill replied, his gaze flitting from the symbol to the shadows that lurked just beyond the kitchen's feeble light. Might be a warning, or maybe a way to summon whatever spirits are restless in these parts. Roger, ever the vigilant companion, remained at Clara's side, his nose twitching as he sniffed the air. He let out a low growl, a sound that sent a shiver down Bill's spine. "Easy, boy," he murmured, reaching out to pat the dog's head. "What's got you all riled up?" The dog's ears perked, and he turned his gaze toward the far corner of the room where the light barely reached. Bill followed his line of sight, heart pounding like a drum. Something seemed to stir in the shadows, a mere flicker, but enough to send a chill racing through him. "Clara, we need to see what's over there," Bill said, determination surging through him. "Grab the lantern from the table." Clara moved quickly, her hands steady despite the unease settling in her stomach. She lit the lantern, and the flickering flame cast an inviting glow that danced against the walls. As they approached the corner, Bill felt the weight of time pressing upon him, as if the very air had grown thicker with each step. "Here goes nothing," he said, reaching out to sweep away the dust with the back of his hand. As he did, he revealed a small trapdoor, its edges worn but intact. "Well, looks like we might be onto something." "What do you think's down there?" Clara asked, peering over his shoulder. "Only one way to find out," Bill replied, heart racing with a mix of excitement and trepidation. He took a firm grip on the iron ring set in the center of the door and pulled. It creaked open with a groan that echoed through the empty house, revealing a darkened space below. "Stay close, Clara. I'll go first," he instructed, glancing back at her. With a deep breath, he descended the narrow steps, Roger trailing closely behind, his senses heightened. The air was cooler down below, tinged with a dampness that sent a shiver through Bill's bones. As his foot hit the ground, he raised the lantern, illuminating the cramped cellar. The light revealed shelves filled with dusty jars, some of them containing what appeared to be herbs and dried plants, while others were filled with murky liquids. In the far corner, Bill's gaze fell upon an old workbench cluttered with tools and odd trinkets. "Clara, come on down," he called softly, motioning for her to join him. "I reckon we might find some answers in here." Clara descended cautiously, her eyes wide with wonder as she surveyed the strange collection. "What do you suppose all this is?" she asked, stepping closer to the workbench. Bill brushed his fingers across the surface, feeling the rough wood beneath his touch. "Looks like someone was dabbling in a bit of herbalism, or maybe even witchcraft," he replied, his voice barely above a whisper. "Could be the Hargroves were trying to communicate with the spirits." He picked up a small vial, its contents swirling like mist, and held it up to the lantern's light. "What do you think this is?" Clara leaned in closer, squinting at the label, which had long faded to near illegibility. "It looks like it used to say Essence of the Forgotten, but it's too worn to be sure." Roger sniffed at the vial, his nose wrinkling in distaste. He took a step back, his growl deepening, as if warning them to be careful. "Easy, boy," Bill said, lowering the vial. "Let's put that back where it was." Just then, a sudden draft swept through the cellar, causing the lantern to flicker violently. Bill steadied it, but Clara's expression turned to one of alarm. "Did you feel that?" Before he could respond, the room grew noticeably colder, and the shadows seemed to stretch and twist around them. The atmosphere crackled with an unseen energy, and Bill felt the hair on the back of his neck stand on end. "Something ain't right," he muttered, instinctively reaching for the revolver at his hip. "We best make our exit while we still can." As he turned to head back toward the stairs, a low, mournful sound echoed through the cellar, a voice that seemed to rise from the very ground itself, a woman's voice, whispering a name. "Evelyn." Bill's heart raced and he glanced at Clara, whose eyes were wide with fear. "Did you hear that?" she whispered, clutching Roger tightly. "I did," he replied, feeling a mix of fear and curiosity. "But we can't stick around to find out who or what it belongs to. Let's get back topside." They hurried toward the steps, but as they did, the air grew thick once more, almost tangible, a force that seemed to press against them. The lantern flickered and dimmed, casting them into a murky twilight as they climbed, shadows swirling with the echoes of the past. Finally reaching the top, they emerged into the kitchen, breathless and shaken. Bill slammed the trapdoor shut and leaned against it, heart pounding. "What in tarnation is going on down there?" he gasped, glancing at Clara, who looked just as shaken. "I don't know," she breathed, "but whatever it is, I think it's tied to that symbol. We need to figure out what it means and how it relates to Evelyn Hargrove." Roger stood guard, ears perked and body tense, as if sensing the lingering presence of something beyond their understanding. The house seemed to hum with anticipation, urging them to uncover the truth that had lain hidden for so long. With renewed resolve, Bill looked at Clara, determination glinting in his eyes. "Let's dig deeper. Whatever is at play here, I reckon we can't let it go unanswered." The night stretched before them, filled with mysteries that beckoned, and with each heartbeat the shadows whispered, urging them toward an unknown destiny that awaited just beyond the veil of the ordinary. The moon hung low in the sky, casting a silver sheen across the rugged terrain outside the Hargrove homestead. Bill rubbed the back of his neck, still feeling the chill of the cellar seep into his bones. "I reckon it's time we had ourselves a look around the property," he said, his voice steadying with purpose. Clara nodded, her resolve mingling with apprehension. Bill stepped out onto the creaking porch, taking in the quiet that enveloped the ranch like a shroud. The stars twinkled above, indifferent to the mysteries unfolding below. Roger, ever vigilant, sniffed the air, his ears twitching at the slightest sound. The dog's instincts had proven invaluable, and Bill couldn't help but feel a swell of gratitude for his loyal companion. "Let's start by checking the barn," he suggested, nodding toward the shadowy structure looming nearby. It was a sturdy place, built of weathered timber and adorned with a roof that sagged just enough to give it character. Bill had a hunch that the barn held secrets of its own, perhaps remnants of the Hargrove family's long-forgotten past. As they approached the barn, the wooden doors creaked open with a reluctant groan. A musty scent wafted out, mingling with the crisp night air. Clara stepped inside, lantern in hand, illuminating the dust motes that danced in the beam of light. Old tools hung from the walls, and hay was scattered across the floor like the remnants of a long-abandoned life. "Looky here," Bill said, motioning to a corner where a pile of old crates lay stacked haphazardly. He moved closer, brushing off the dust to reveal faded labels, some written in a script that seemed almost foreign, while others were scrawled in a hurried hand. These looked like they might be important. "Let's see what's inside," Clara urged, her curiosity piqued. Together they pried open the nearest crate, revealing a collection of faded photographs. They were sepia-toned images of the Hargrove family, smiling in front of the very barn that stood before them, the faces of long-gone ancestors captured in time. But it was the image at the bottom that caught Bill's eye. It showed a woman with striking features, dark hair cascading like a waterfall, and eyes that seemed to glimmer with an otherworldly light. "This must be Evelyn," he murmured, holding the photograph closer to the lantern's glow. "And there's something about her, like she's looking right through you." Clara leaned in, her brow furrowed. "She looks almost alive, don't she? Like she's watching us." Roger, sensing the weight of the moment, let out a low whine, his body tense. Bill felt a shiver run down his spine as the air around them thickened again, echoing with whispers that seemed to swirl just out of reach. "I reckon this might not be the best place to linger," he said, his instincts urging caution. They placed the photograph back into the crate, sealing it as they had found it. "What do you think those labels meant?" Clara asked, glancing around, her voice barely above a whisper. "Could be there for potions or remedies," Bill replied, his thoughts racing. "Or maybe something darker. We best keep our wits about us." He turned to head back toward the barn doors when a glimmer caught his eye, something shiny half buried in the hay. Kneeling down, Bill pulled out a small locket, tarnished but intricately designed, its clasp worn with age. He opened it carefully, revealing a tiny portrait inside, Evelyn again, but this time with a man beside her, his face obscured by time. "Now, what have we here?" he murmured, examining it closely. Clara gasped. "It's beautiful. But who's the fellow with her? Do you think he's part of the mystery?" "Could be," Bill said, slipping the locket into his pocket. "Might be worth investigating who he is and what ties he had to Evelyn." Roger, meanwhile, had wandered off a few paces, his nose to the ground. He paused, lifting his head as if listening to the wind. "What is it, boy?" Bill called, intrigued by the dog's sudden alertness. Roger barked, then trotted toward the far end of the barn, where a collection of old barrels stood. Bill and Clara followed, their curiosity piqued. As they approached, Roger sniffed vigorously at one barrel, his tail wagging with excitement. "Looks like he found something," Clara said, kneeling beside the dog. She tapped lightly on the barrel's surface, and it emitted a hollow sound. "What do you think's inside?" With a determined nod, Bill pulled at the barrel's top, but it wouldn't budge. "Might need a bit of muscle," he said, shifting his stance. Together, they managed to pry the lid open, revealing a collection of dusty glass bottles nestled within. The labels were similarly faded, but one caught Bill's eye, Elixir of the Eternal. He exchanged a glance with Clara, the weight of the name hanging between them like a storm cloud. "What in tarnation does that mean?" "Could be a clue," Clara suggested, her voice trembling with a mix of excitement and dread. "Maybe it's connected to that spirit we heard down below." Just then, the air grew heavy again, and a gust of wind whipped through the barn, extinguishing their lantern. Darkness enveloped them like a thick blanket, and Bill's heart raced as he fumbled for his gun. "Stay close, Clara. Whatever's going on, I can feel it in my bones. We ain't alone." The shadows loomed, and Bill strained his ears, every creak and whisper echoing with tension. Roger's growl reverberated in the silence, a warning that something was amiss. A chill danced on the edge of the air, and in that moment, they both understood that the threads of the past were unraveling, pulling them deeper into a mystery that was only just beginning to unfold. The darkness hung thick like a heavy fog, and Bill felt the weight of it pressing against his chest. Clara's breath hitched beside him, and Roger stood with fur bristled, a sentinel on high alert. "Ain't no ghost gonna scare me away," Bill muttered under his breath, but the uncertainty gnawed at him. He had to keep his wits about him and protect Clara. "Maybe we should light that lantern again," she suggested, her voice a thin thread of sound. "Best not to, not yet," Bill replied, scanning the shadows that danced like specters around them. "We need to keep our eyes sharp. Something's got this barn rattled, and I reckon it's got nothing to do with the dead." Just then, Roger moved forward, nose to the ground, sniffing with intent. Bill exchanged a glance with Clara and followed the dog, who seemed drawn to the far wall of the barn. As they approached, Roger stopped and began to paw at the ground, revealing a patch of dirt that seemed disturbed. "Looks like we might have hit the jackpot, partner." Bill said, kneeling beside Roger. He brushed away the dirt with his hands until he uncovered a small, rusted key. It was no ordinary key. This one had a peculiar design etched into its surface. Clara gasped. "That looks like it might fit into a lock somewhere." "Right you are," Bill agreed, excitement bubbling within him. "Let's see what it unlocks." With the key clasped tightly in his hand, they started searching the barn, their eyes peeled for any sign of a lock. Bill's heart raced as he thought of the secrets that might be waiting behind a door. Finally, they stumbled upon an old weathered chest tucked beneath a pile of hay bales. "Here we go," he said, inserting the key into the lock. A satisfying click echoed in the quiet barn as he turned it. Lifting the lid, Bill's heart sank at the sight within. Stacks of old letters, yellowed with age, and a few more photographs of Evelyn. But this time with the man from the locket, a young man named Samuel Hargrove. "Look here," Clara said, her finger tracing over a letter addressed to Evelyn. "It's from Samuel. He was writing to her about some land deal gone sour, but it seems there was more to it. He mentions a hidden stash of riches and something about her needing to keep it safe from a rival family." Bill's mind raced. Could this be the reason for all the strange happenings? If someone's trying to find that fortune, they'd sure make it look like a ghost story to scare folks off. Roger barked softly, as if urging them to hurry. "Let's get this back to town," Clara said, her voice steady with newfound resolve. "We can show it to Sheriff Collins. He might know who's been snooping around the Hargrove place." With the chest secured, they made their way back through the darkened barn. Just as they reached the doors, they heard a soft shuffle behind them. Bill spun around, his instincts flaring. Emerging from the shadows was a figure cloaked in a long coat, a familiar face breaking through the gloom. Tommy Redfield, the local gambler known for his slippery ways. "Thought I might find you here," Tommy said, a sly grin plastered across his face. "You ain't the only ones curious about the Hargrove fortune." "Looks like you've been up to no good," Bill said, his voice low and dangerous. "What are you after, Tommy? Ghost stories ain't worth a dime." "I was hoping to scare you away long enough to find that treasure for myself," Tommy admitted, his bravado cracking. "But it seems you've got more brains than I gave you credit for. I figured the stories of Evelyn's ghost might just do the trick." "And you thought you'd scare folks off, huh?" Clara interjected, stepping forward. "But you can't keep the truth buried forever, Tommy. Guess I should have thought twice about messing with the likes of you two," Tommy said, his bravado slipping as the reality of his predicament dawned on him. "I didn't mean no harm, just wanted what was mine." Bill stepped closer, keeping his gaze steady. "You'll have to answer to the sheriff, Tommy. This ain't just about treasure, it's about respecting the folks who built this land." With the evidence in hand, they returned to town, where Sheriff Collins listened intently to their tale. As they laid out the letters and photographs, the sheriff's brow furrowed with understanding. "This explains a lot. I've been wondering who's been prowling around that old barn. Reckon it's time we put an end to Tommy's games." The sheriff rounded up Tommy and took him into custody, ensuring the townsfolk would be safe from his schemes. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting golden rays across the plains, Bill felt a sense of peace settle over him. "We did it, boy," he said, ruffling Roger's fur. "You were right all along. That old dog of ours has a nose for trouble and a heart of gold." Roger wagged his tail, as if he understood every word. Clara laughed, her spirit lifted. "You know, maybe the real treasure wasn't gold or silver at all, but the stories and the truth we uncovered." Bill nodded, a smile creeping onto his face. "You got that right, Clara. And maybe we'll make our own stories to tell one day, about how we faced down a ghost story and came out on top." As they strolled home under the vast sky, the stars began to twinkle like diamonds scattered across the dark canvas, a reminder that even in the wild frontier, hope and friendship could light the way through any darkness.